Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What the Haul. I'm your host, Mohammed. It's the first of the month, so we're doing the new ins. So first is from Sunday Riley. This is called the B3 Nice 10% Niacinamide Serum. Okay, so Sunday Riley, I kind of wrestled with this brand when what's it called? Good Genes. When that came out, I was like, "Ooh, that's me. This has my name all over it," and it was not. It was really not for me. But then on the flip side of that, you have the Luna oil, which I think is one of the most outstanding products I've come across. Based off the strength of the Luna oil, I was like, let's have a look at this serum. So in terms of the copy, it's not for me, right? This is a product for those people with dilated pores, redness, and scarring. Now, scarring, I can absolutely get on board with, trying to even out the skin, but the redness and the pores, not a concern that I have. With that said, this is a very light, very fresh texture, which was impressive. Most of the Sunday Riley products don't necessarily have the best textures, but this is really impressive. If you do have those concerns and you are in the market for a new serum, this looks promising. It didn't smell particularly good, but it did feel nice. And, Sunday Riley does make products that are very active. So definitely look into some reviews to see what other people have said about it. But this is saying a lot to me. I think this is quite impressive. The next launch at Estee Lauder, they have updated their Nutritious range of skincare. So Nutritious is the products that come in like the ruby red sort of packaging. Previously, they were highlighting this is an antioxidant range. It's loaded with pomegranates. This is your antioxidant skincare. And it was quite an expansive offering. They had lots of different things over the years. I think at one stage they had makeup in it. I've used the mask and the oil in this. Oh, that oil was really, really good. But now it's on its way out. If you go to the last chance section of the Estee Lauder website in your region, you may find some of these Nutritious products in the old formula heavily discounted. But the new formula, it's got a very clear message. Again, I'm not the target for this. It's 4 SKUs. And it is saying it's got red algae, sea kelp, and coconut ferment. It's talking about having EWG, Environmental Working Group certification or verification. It's that website that talks about how everything is toxic. So they've got their seal of approval. And these products, where the original Nutritious was very clearly targeted at an East Asian consumer, this time around they're kind of leaning into the younger Gen Z customer because everything is for combination normal oily skin. It's got light, fresh textures. They use this language about having grumpy skin. So again, pores, acne, all that sort of stuff. And it's kind of interesting that they've launched this at the tail end of the summer. So I would argue they're probably aiming this to not only the younger consumers, but the younger consumers' moms who still buy night repair. And say, oh, your kid's going off to res, get them, this cleanser that's a mask and this, airy lotion. So it's moderately priced for Estee Lauder. If you have some gaps in your routine and you do like your Estee Lauder products, maybe you've got a combination skin, definitely look into this. Yeah, interesting. But again, try to see if you can find the remnants of the old range on discounts. The next launch that was eyes popping out of my head are 2 tinted products from 2 different brands. Not usually part of my wheelhouse, but something kind of sparked my interest when I was on TikTok looking at Janae Naylor or Hilo Lux's TikTok, and she did a little clip where she was doing her makeup using Bobbi Brown, and it turns out that they've come out with a new tinted moisturizer. My dusty behind, when I was on counter, and I'm like in my early 20s, right? So on Friday mornings at 7, I would be on my way to school. Then after school, I would go to work. And then after work, I'd go out for the night. And then on Saturday morning, I'd go back to work after having 3 hours of sleep. That was my regular routine. And when I was on the counters, I would always creep my way over to Bobbi Brown first thing in the morning. And I would always hit it with a little bit of tinted balm, just to kind of disguise the shadows around my eyes, because that was like a foolproof product. It was completely transparent. You couldn't really see any color, but it just had like this kind of glossy sheen. So I'm kind of familiar with some of the Bobbi Brown tints. that was a really strong product. And so when I saw this, I was like, oh, what's going on here? I went to Sephora. There's 18 shades of this. It's nothing like the original or the Bobbi Brown Tinted Balm that I'm thinking of. That was RIP to that one. A real winner. This stuff, it's very fluid. It's a factor 15. It comes in about 18 different shades. It's really for the person who has really good skin and just wants perfect skin. It's not for coverage. It's got like a little bit of like a luminosity to it. When I was playing with it, I squeezed way too much product onto my hand. So it was a little bit too hydrating. If you shear it out or use it very sparingly, I'm sure it'll be comfortable on most skins. But I would argue this is probably more normal, slightly dry. I think for those people who are oily, it's going to be too glowy. From what I remember, Bobbi does have really good tints. And this looks really promising. And, Bobbi in the 90s was the brand. If you had black and brown skin, they had a color for you when no one else did. Although Bobbi isn't there anymore, Estee Lauder is really doing a good job of trying to keep this brand going and reviving it and coming out with interesting launches. And then the other one, this is from Chanel, and I'm just pulling up my video of this. This is the CC cream. It's a factor 50. And if I'm not mistaken, on the website, it says that there's 7 shades. CC meaning complete coverage. In terms of Chanel, tinted moisturizers have always existed. It just so happens that 10 or so years ago, brands were like, oh, what are they doing in East Asia? Oh, they've got these CC BB things. Let's bring them over to the West. And I've done a really poor job of swatching this. I'm sure I tried the 2 deepest shades, probably 50 and 70 or 60 and 70. Ultimately, what I wanted for you to take away from this is quite dense. It feels quite rich, and it really does cover. So you do have to really try this, where the Bobbi Brown that I mentioned earlier is really forgiving. This, because it's CC cream and it's complete coverage, it is proper makeup with high sun protection. So I think this is an ideal product for somebody who has melasma or somebody who has photosensitivity and needs coverage, color, and sunscreen. This is ideal for that person. My observation is the colors, even for me, like the deepest shade could have been like a summer shade if I had more of a tan. It's really tricky. You do have to go to the counter. You do have to play with this product, but really it's for people my coloring and lighter. Unfortunately, they don't have a good offering in this, but have a go. Definitely take a look at it if you are in the market for high protection makeup. And then the last thing, and this is the one that really I was waiting all month for this. So this is the original bottle, and I do believe but when Tom Ford had their range of fragrances at the early stages, right, they would sometimes come out with limited edition capsules. So this was part of, I think, all floral. So there was Plum Japonais, this Cafe Rose, and there was a third fragrance that went along with it. It was slow moving. They weren't doing as much limited editions. This is the time before they had makeup, right? It was primarily just the fragrances. So this came out in 2012. I haven't had it for that long. Trust me, mine's old, but it's not that old. And I still have more than half of the bottle left because this is completely different to the new Tom Ford. So they've come out with this new one. It's this beautiful, frosted, fluted bottle. It looks stunning. The packaging, they win. They did a really good job of updating the look of the product. But as somebody who was a fan of the original fragrance and still wears this every so often, this isn't for us. If you have a deep love of Cafe Rose Tom Ford, you're not going to like this new one. This new one very clearly states it is an amber floral fragrance for women. That's how they're positioning it. Whereas the original launch from 2012 was a chiffre floral, and it was marketed towards men and women, where that was the whole thing with the Tom Ford fragrances. Was it wasn't particularly gendered. Everything was for everyone. The private collections were very much gender neutral, top of the top, best of the best sort of fragrances. That was the sort of positioning, right? And this new Cafe Rose, it's more positioned with the other premium fragrances, and you can tell by the bottle. So this is kind of like the women's answer to a Grey Vetiver, or a complement to Black Orchid. It's in that sort of family of fragrances. My observations are it's more rose, less coffee, less earthy, warm notes, and more floral, where the original one was a really considered scent. That's how I described it here. You wore it with intention because it was so bold and so in your face. You could get heavy-handed with this fragrance very quickly. So you had to be really measured and calculated about how and when and why you were wearing it. That's why I've had this bottle for so long. It's not something like even the Dior Col Noir. I can really just bathe myself in it and it's fine. It's just a very fresh, wonderful, easy to wear fragrance. This, you have to wear it with intention. That's what I think they're doing with this new version of Cafe Rose, is they made it so like a generic rose fragrance that anyone can wear it at any time. And it is very feminine. It doesn't have that deepness and that intensity that the old one had with the coffee and the earthy notes, that a man could pull it off. It's a real letdown. If I was to replace the Cafe Rose, the only other fragrance of a similar ilk would be the Rose from Louis Vuitton. I remember smelling a man, he walked by me, I was like, what the hell is that? That's incredible. And then, yeah, he says to me, it's the Vuitton in the dark bottle. And Vuitton fragrances are very expensive, but they're not, fragrances that you buy just on a whim if you're a regular person, but their prices aren't so excessive in terms of where we are now. If you are buying private blends or private collection from Tom Ford or Creed, the Vuitton fragrances aren't that much of a stretch. But that said, that Vuitton fragrance is probably the closest thing I've come to in terms of my old Cafe Rose. But this new launch is an absolute disappointment. Absolute disappointment. So yeah, I hate to end it on that note, but this was the thing that I was most compelled and most excited about this month, and they've completely fucked it up. Give it a new name. Don't call it Cafe Rose. It's not Cafe Rose. It's not Cafe Rose. It needs a different name. I'm fuming. Yeah, so that's this month's roundup of newness. As always, leave a comment, thumbs up, thumbs down, do whatever is in your heart. And as always, thank you for listening. Thank me for speaking. And I will catch you in the next one. Adios.